Yo, yo,
Luke,
yo.
what is happening?
Luke, we
Hello,
were talking
Chris.
about earlier about our last night's conversation about, I said, how do you know Tim? And it's like that Hollywood thing of you don't know how you first met someone in the Hollywood
I
jungle.
remember how I met Luke, though. I remember
Okay,
meeting
let's see.
Luke.
Okay.
Do you remember where? Okay, that.
I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Pretty sure. Well, there's only like 3 or 4 places it could have been, but I'm going to go down to the Club Lingerie.
Okay.
And I'm going to say Broken Glass was, we were probably like a Thursday 10 o'clock band at that point. Like starting to come up a bit, decent slots, beginnings of popularity. And they had a dressing room there, which was rare. But anyone could come in, and people did. It was a big dressing room. So it was always a pretty good party in that dressing room. And I remember you and I think Marco coming into the dressing room, and you driven down, and you were full. You had all the clobber, and Broken Glass was always a little down from that, a little bit.
Right.
You had the full clobber, white creepers, and everything. And you came into the dressing room, which took balls. I thought, I would never walk in. I barely walk into the Junkyard dressing room. Those guys were scary. You know what I mean? Like I'd never walk into like a Tex and the Horseheads dressing room.
Right. I was probably just following Marco. If this
he's Italian. He's got that kind of thing. And you guys walked in and we said, "Oh, we love your band." And we got a band. We're called Lost Kittens. And I just said, "Well, come down and play with us." Because you said you come from Santa Barbara. So you came all this way. Next time, I'll see if I can sling you on the bill. And we started chatting, and I think that was maybe one of your first Hollywood shows. We made you. It was like us and maybe Junkyard. Maybe it was Junkyard, Broken Glass, Lost Kittens, or something like that. I can't remember, but I remember saying like, "Yeah, bring your." And I was like, "Wow, they're a young kid." I mean, you were young. You were still in high school then. I was
totally
21 or 22. You were 17 or 18. How you got in, I don't know, but usually you have to be a hot chick to get into lingerie. So maybe it was lingerie because it was hard to get in there if you were underage, but you got in, you played there. I know that. And then you came, and then I remember like, wow, it's cool that there's young guys doing this now too. This thing that we thought was just this thing down here was spreading. And, and so that was the first time I met you, I think.
Well, I saw you before I ever met you. I know this. Opening for the Chili Peppers in Santa Barbara.
Oh, that's right. At the Graduate.
Yeah. And I didn't know you, but I saw you and totally loved your band. And I also, at that point, you were totally on my radar because we were like Bam Magazine, worshipers. So we were,
of course,
nothing slid by us. We saw everything there was to see in that magazine. So, seeing you guys playing at screen.
That was a crazy show, but people think about that now, and back then that wasn't that weird. Like you'd see the Chili Peppers with GNR. I saw the Chili Pepper GNR open for the Chili Peppers.
Right. Yeah.
And now people think like, what is that all about? Like there wasn't all these partitions. Like James would play with Jet Boy, and
because there wasn't those bands hadn't come along and made genres yet.
Yeah, it wasn't a genre yet. Yeah. It was just like this hodgepodge of metal, goth, punk, glam. It was all kind of a big stew, and so no one, street. It wasn't called street or hair, or it just was. And so I remember that show because it was the guy from Dead Kennedys was playing drums for them, and we went up, and it was packed, of course, and it was like right on the campus, right? It was like in Isla Vista.
Yeah, right in Isla Vista. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was they gave us there was this huge cafeteria that they made the dressing room, so we were sharing a dressing room with the Chili Peppers, and they were newly sober. And so they said, "Oh, you can have all our beer." And we thought we'd won the fucking lottery. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
We're like, "Really?" And he's like, "Yeah, go ahead." And so we drank, we drank their beer. We were on, we did our 40 minutes. And then, I think we went, found some locals and went traipsing about the campus for the rest of the night, Yeah.
Oh,
that was fun.
That was Isla Vista always rated in like the top 3 of college party towns in Playboy.
I think we did end up at like 2 in the morning.
Playboy, you said?
Yeah. Playboy would do a top college towns.
It was. I remember that. Yeah. Now I think.
And it was like Isla Vista's up there. Just to give you an idea of it, it's up there with like schools like Alabama and like places that you would just think would be like beyond notorious.
Right. Yeah.
And so Isla Vista is
you had that show.
Legit day, yeah.
Oh, well, good. I'm glad someone was there. I say I did that, and some people are like, "No way." I'm like, "I did do it."
I saw it. I saw it. And at that point in time, you go see anything that had loud guitar. But I will say, Broken Glass is way more up my alley stylistically than the Chili Peppers. Although I did like the Chili Peppers, those early records. But,
those early records were a thing, but yeah, they were. Yeah.
I'm with you, Luke. I didn't get it at that point early on. It just seemed like a bunch of crazy guys, just like a little too funky.
Yeah,
it was sort of that too.
Yeah, very much.
There was you're right as well, but I don't know. Anything that was coming out of Hollywood, we all kind of followed no matter what, and they were a Hollywood band, like, but they were just a little and the fact that they had I don't know how they were able to do it, but they did it. So,
Yeah.
Wow, that's great. So I can't remember that, but
man, Luke, you were telling me that Tim wrote some theme songs we were going over everything he's done. It was pretty crazy, man. The list you were giving me.
Yeah. I told Britt, Tim, that I remembered running into you at the Rasplers house, the guys that managed 311.
Yeah.
And I think you had sort of newly had the Craig Ferguson theme song under your belt. And we were kind of talking because I had done the thing that was on the Simple Life, the Miss Hilton song.
Oh,
and we were sort of conferring about like, what's that going to mean financially? Is this a good thing? Like,
Right. And I was still learning too,
Yeah.
That was a game changer theme to get. I mean,
boy, I'll say
it was, on every single night, 5 nights a week on CBS. And, it was, and then I started working for him. I still work for him. He did an Amazon miniseries a couple of years ago. I did that, but I did his game show, and I mean, he's been great. I mean,
yeah,
that was luck. I mean, I've done a bunch of themes up until that point,
It all is,
but it was luck.
In this field of making music for picture, it's everybody's experiencing some kind of luck if they're having
which is
success.
what both you guys do. It's pretty crazy that both you guys do this, and you also play in like complete rockin' bands. Like most people, it's like you're going to see the guy at the baked potato and it's kind of like fusion-y, but you guys, like it's like Clark Kent what you guys are doing. It's pretty crazy.
Well, being able to actually play rock and roll authentically is kind of rare. I mean, I don't know if you find this or not, but when you bring something to a lot of these, whatever it's a music library or whatever it is, to actually really do it and it feels like it's real, that's probably what we bring is the sense
for sure
that it's a real band or like it's real people playing it.
No.
Because we're just shitty enough. Like bands usually aren't very good. Let's be honest. They make a racket, but if you took the individual parts apart, it's not good.
I used to be sort of on a roster of this music house in New York, and I'll leave the name off because what I was doing was slightly shady. But they would have this thing
We've all done a bit of that.
Where you would upload your tracks to you'd get a submission, blah blah blah. This is for McDonald's. Upload your tracks, and they gave you a code so nobody knew who was who. But you could actually go in and look at other people's tracks.
Yeah.
And anytime I noticed if it was like we need something that sounds like the soundtrack from Jurassic Park, I'd be like, oh God, here we go. Like I'm just so out of my league here, but I'll try it. I'll try something.
Yeah.
But anytime they're like, this needs to sound like a real band, the client's a total stickler, and it needs to have vocals, I'd be just counting my money already because I'm like, these like MIDI dorks that, went to Juilliard or whatever their thing is, they're not going to bring what, albeit I'm pretty limited in my musical prowess, but it's like this I got. And a lot of times, if it was something they wanted a rock band and they needed a rock singer, especially, it was like Candy from a Baby. Those gigs. That was
my kind of my loss leader when I was getting into it. I got started more in advertising, and then television took off. But then advertising was it was a little simpler. Now music houses dominates a whole different animal. But then it was you couldn't get guys who first of all, had been signed or were signed to do shit like that. I mean, now you can get whoever the fuck you want, but then unless you were willing to pay crazy money, you couldn't get actual recording artists to go and do rock, and rock was still the dominant music then.
Yeah.
And that was kind of my thing. Like, I had been signed a couple times, and I had been a real legitimate, rock and roll bands, and I was able to give them that. And I ended up getting a whole series of Toyota commercials because the creative brief was like, we like something like Minor Threat. I'm like, I think I got it. And
Right.
you know what I mean? And they're like, this is like a lost Minor Threat song. I'm like, yeah.
You don't say.
You don't say. I was there. So, and it was a thing. And then same with the Ferguson theme. That was very much of a band song. It had singing, though I sang it originally, and that's a different vibe. It was like very much me and my Preservation Green Society air.
Yeah, that total Britt vibe.
Total Britt. It was like a cross between Your Mother Should Know and, I Remember Walter and Mr. Blue Sky and, and 6 other McCartney.
And Craig sang that, right?
Yeah, originally. Well, there was a funny thing. Originally, I sang it. It was a demo, and it was all about daytime. It was for a different show, and then I didn't know the fuck he was. I got a phone call. My buddy was the EP on the show, said, "Send me some stuff." Thinking he was just like, this guy might be a guy who could do it, and then he would write some stuff, and we would see if he liked it. No, Craig heard this on a CD, so long ago it was, and he just says, "This is it. I want this." And they called me. I got a phone call, and some Scottish guys like, "Yeah, it's Craig Ferguson." I'm like, "What the fuck?" I mean, I guess I'd heard the name, and he says, "I want this to be the theme. I want to rewrite." So we basically made it. Everything was get up to stay up. We made it night for day. And he came in one day and we sang it, and we kept all the background vocals for me. It's the demo thing. It's the demo track.
That's the best kind of thing.
And it was it. Like we eventually went in a few years later and did a full-blown version with like live drums. But before then, it was all in the box. But it kind of gave it that quaint thing, But when I sang it, I even did the telephone, Uncle Albert, Paul McCartney thing, it was very twee, but he got the campiness of it and could sing it, and so he sang it, and that was actually a SAG thing as well, because he was already getting paid, and they were so fucking cheap. I'm like, well, I'm singing the background vocals, shouldn't I get SAG? And they're like, oh, well then if you want SAG, we'll just strip the background vocals. I'm like, yeah, be fucking kidding me.
I know.
And
it's like what that would mean to the company is so minuscule, and what it would mean to you
I'd still have the health care, and I'd probably be fully pension vested, you know what I mean?
Yeah
that shit was on 10 fucking years.
God, so that's crazy. Man.
Yeah.
Wow.
What's weird is too, you guys both are skaters on top of that. You both were big skateboarders, right? The two of you. There's so many.
I was when I was really young, but I got my second concussion sent me running to the guitar. So, my brother was really good. He was like a pro, but that's an East Coast style pro. Like it wasn't in the same ballpark of, but skating, the original, skater culture, the Z-Boy shit was such a huge influence on DC when I grew up, when we were all just Jay Adams and Tony Alva freaks, that part, the culture of it influenced us getting into music, just that outsider culture of that part of skateboarding. But we all of us started to realize we weren't very good.
I don't think I realized that you were from DC, Tim.
Yeah, born and raised.
Do you know Brian from when you guys were kids?
I knew him out here, but because he went to the different high school. I went to Wilson. Which was where Ian and Jeff from Minor Threat were at. And Jeff's little brother was in my high school band. And so I used to skateboard with Ian. Alec, his little brother, was in my geometry class. I mean, like, it's pretty small. So I was one school and Brian was the other. So he was a private school kid. I was a public school kid. And we met here, ironically, on Melrose. I was working on Melrose at Flash Feed, as one did.
Oh, wow.
He came in and was putting flyers on, flyers on the floor, and Pussycat, just stacks of them.
Yeah.
And Flash Feet was the place to put them because everybody went in there. And he was putting Dag Nasty flyers because Dag Nasty was playing Club Lingerie, which they had moved out here and were really in the end of falling apart. And they didn't play a lot of 21 and over places ever. And so, but I saw him and I said, "Oh, hey, you're Brian from DC. I'm Tim from DC." And he was living down in Hermosa, I think, with Dag Nasty. And he's like, "Well, I got this Dag Nasty show." And then he just literally saw what was going on at Flash Feed and the comings and goings and people. And, I said, "Let's come to the back. We'll, smoke a joint or have a beer or whatever." Because that's what it was like that. They were, blasting, Fair Warning or something like that.
Right.
And he was like, "Well, this is fucking great." And he broke up Dag Nasty, moved up into Hollywood, a block away from us. And then he ran into Chris Gates at the 7-Eleven on Hollywood and Taft or whatever that was. I think it was Taft.
Junkyard was born.
Junkyard was born at a 7-Eleven. Come on.
Well, they were all basically signed, and the original guitar player was leaving, and Brian knew Gates from the old days. and they happened because everyone lived on Wilton or Taft, right in that little circle, lived the shitty part of East Hollywood, and they ran into each other at the and we were playing the Junkyard demo in the store, so we play local bands, our band's demos, and
Yeah.
you know, Junkyard would come in with a demo, or LA Guns had a demo, we'd play them, we'd crank them, you know, and that was a big thing. And
where was
so
that tap? Where was that tap 7-Eleven? What street is that by? Is that I'm trying to get a picture of it.
There was like that Pier 1 Imports next to it, and then it was right there. So it's like right before the freeway on Hollywood Boulevard.
Oh yeah, down by Bronson.
Yeah.
Yes,
right
okay,
there. So,
okay.
anyway, they bumped each other at 7-Eleven, and that was it. You know, they knew each other, the hardcore thing, and Brian had heard about Junkyard because I got him a job working at Flat. You know, I just said, well, come here. And we became, and we've been thick as thieves ever since. So I didn't know him until out here, but, you know, we were talking about, like, you know, Hollywood years age you. You get tight with people, and you know, we were saying those people I kind of came up with, those are still in the closest circle of friends I probably
had. It's almost like going to war. We always talk, the analogy is it's our war. I mean, that's a Dean Del Rey quote, but our Vietnam, man, it's like we all went to war, lost brothers, people came out, lots of things happened.
This might be indicative of coming from Santa Barbara, but I was going to use the metaphor of summer camp. Like when you meet people at camp, you're like, hey, you're my buddy for life.
Yeah, I said that. I was describing, like, well, I guess to some people it's like who went to college and were in frats. I guess it's sort of that too. But you know, but we were doing something. You know, we weren't just partying, though. We did our fair share of that. We were trying to make records or get signed.
Yeah,
create some art of some sort, or meet girls, or all the above. You know.
Yeah.
So there was a lot. There was a little more to it. So DC and. That was a big part of it too, being a DC guy. And there's a contingent of DC folk, like there's a contingent of Florida folk, and there's Santa Barbara folk, and you know.
Yep.
Man.
And New Jersey.
New Jersey. Yeah, sure.
New Jersey. I mean, you know what, Luke, I was thinking, we haven't brought up, I always think it's cool when there's a band, and to give a band a good second life, like even the Chili Peppers, you bring in a new member that's been a friend but understands the concept of the band, maybe even more than the members that started the band. I think even Zach with Ozzy understands the Ozzy concept. I think John Frusciante understands the Chili Peppers concept, maybe more than the Chili Peppers. And I think you understand the Junkyard concept, and that's how you're able to move the ball down the field.
I guess maybe because I was, you know, there but distant. So I saw everything, and then I was involved artistically towards the end of the first run, you know, writing and things like that. And I did so many shows with them, and we were roommates. So I mean, I was around a ton, but I always, maybe it's me, my built-in bullshit detector about what I always thought that was their strengths that I could see from being outside of it. And now I'm inside, I can act as someone who had won all of the knowledge. I'm not coming in without knowing every little nook and cranny of it, to also say, but this to me was what moved me as a fan. Yeah. And that's what I want to bring as a member, is that thing, you know, and maybe it's an eternal search for that, but it's generally, I think, showcasing David in his best light, because he's great. And how do you, that's what the band always has been about, you know, the David Roach, as we say, you know, it's like almost like a separate entity. This band is there to support that, the David Roach, like what that represents and everything. And so, you know, I'm always much like, this is what we're here to do. No one would pay $20 to see me, you, and Todd. You know what I mean? So let's, you know, let's keep our eye on the prize. And I always thought David was like different and great. And and maybe that's what I try to bring, is to great place for him to be, or a place that he feels comfortable to do what he thinks would be good. Maybe that's also too, is just a safe space, you know?
Yeah. What totally. Cause what Britt's saying, I mean, the guys in the band are going to feel a lot more at ease with someone that is already in the friend circle and all that stuff.
Yeah. People say, like, how did you get Jimmy, or things that we talk about this, like, it's not really auditions. It's like, you had to have, like you said, you had to have been there, and no one's going to explain to you what it was like to play the Central at 9:30 on a Tuesday. You have to have done it. You know what I mean? Yeah. And, you know, Jimmy was there with Rock City Angels initially, and then he's been hanging a long time too, but you know, he was there when it all happened, and there aren't a lot of us. It's a pretty small group.
And if you get Jimmy, it's not like, God, I hope Jimmy doesn't show up with like a Parker fly and,
Right.
and
Right.
spandex or something. It's like,
No,
no. He's going to
no.
show up with the proper gear and
Yeah,
understand the
you know, he
concept.
gets the identikit, you know, and
Yeah.
we don't we don't have to do the math for him because we're not
Yeah.
going to do the math. Like you'd be
Right.
very lonely in that van if you didn't understand all the things we're fucking talking about, you know.
Yeah.
And so it's a kind of it's interesting that way too. It's a you know, you were all there, you all went through it, and you know, we had little slightly different time frames, but um it was a bit of a maelstrom that you kind of came out the other end. And I think most people, I don't know, kind of retreated for a while. I retreated for a while just for self-preservation as much as anything. And I think a lot of people did that. But it's interesting. And then people have kids and everything. But when we go out, people have circled back. The kids are old enough they can afford to go out again. The kids are in college, whatever. And so, you know, we find it turns into, you know, I guess reliving their past a bit. But you know, we find ourselves reinvigorated because that part of like putting it where it was and what was that experience and whatever kind of fallout you had personally and which could still be going on and probably is for a lot of people, and we survive and the survival rate and all that,
Yeah.
recalibrate and be able to now look, I'm going, okay, here we are, this is the thing that we built, where do we go forward with it? And we've been lucky that some people seem to have been like the new model too, you know, which is a blessing. And I was saying before, like, but you know, they'll get their Hollywood too. I mean, and I think about it now and I listen to Hollywood and I go, God, was this song on the money? Like if there is one
Oh
song
yeah.
that really, you know, people think it's Welcome to the Jungle. I'm like, if I were to describe that scene in one song, that song explains it. Living like we want to, not like we should is exactly right. Exactly right. More than You're in the Jungle.
Yeah, because it's a little bit understand, like the Welcome to the Jungle thing is pretty, it hits you over the head.
It's on the nose, yeah.
Yeah.
But Hollywood, the saying Hollywood is pretty on the nose. I mean,
yeah,
you know,
but
you
it's
know
a
what
little
you're
more,
talking
there's
about.
something a little more sarcastic about Junkyard, which
Right.
is,
Yeah, there we always try to keep a little bit of a, we can never be too direct. You know, like,
And now, Luke, their new single's Lifer. How great is that as down the road? I mean, dude,
Totally,
I mean, he
that's,
said that. I was like, I mean,
Yeah.
is that a fucking, like, does that not tell the story perfectly as all
it's
three
one
of us
thing
sit here?
It's a great thing about getting to a certain age that, because those things that are great about getting old are few and far between. But one of them is that you can just confidently say, yep, lifer. You know,
we
like,
were saying, like, we're here now. Like,
Yeah.
no one's searching really at this point. Like, this is where I'm at. I'm doing this, good, bad, or indifferent. You know,
Yeah.
I've got this. You know, we all have the bits that are parts of our lives, and we're trying to just be happy within the framework that we've created for ourselves. Because you've created your framework by now.
Yeah.
And so you're a lifer, and coming around to the thought of like, no, I'm a rock and roll musician, and I'll be doing it in some form or fashion, probably, you know, as I go, because I've never really stopped. You've been playing clubs since you were a little kid, me too, and I tell people that, and they think it's insane. Like, your parents let you play at a nightclub at 16. I'm like, I begged, you know, you know, and that's what I wanted to do.
There was not without a lot of lobbying. Did you get to do that?
Yeah, well, there was definitely
we talked too, Tim, like one of the hardest things is when you go to a family function to this day and people go, hey, you still at it with the music? Hey, Tim, you still at it with the band? You still at it with the music? And you gotta, yeah.
You know, it's funny. I thought by becoming a composer, which is, I always, you know, wrong, you know, but the thing you could say at weddings when your friends have straight gigs and you're like, what do you do? I'm a composer, you know, and then they say, well, what do you do? And you name like 4 things they've never heard of any of them, you know, and it's almost like you want to show them the keys to your house. Like, no, I actually make a living at it. You know, it's not, oh, like you're like a jingle writer. I'm like, yeah, that's it. I'm a jingle writer.
Sure.
You know
whatever
what I mean?
you
Like,
want. Yeah.
You know,
but that's where it's nice to whip out those kind of more marquee things. Like, you know, the Craig Ferguson show. Oh, yeah.
That helped for a while. It's been gone a little bit now, but it did help for a while. You know, it's nice to have a calling card, and it's actually pretty memorable. It does stand out a bit, you know, so that is good. But I didn't get no Emmy or nothing, you know. So
yeah.
You guys, you know,
where's my damn Emmy?
I was rewatching Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and we're talking about that era. Isn't it weird how when we got there, that 60s influence was still there on Hollywood Boulevard? All those places, Ivar Theaters, Pussycat Theaters.
Totally.
It's still we got to the end of that Hollywood. I mean, now it looks like Disneyland, but we had that influence of that Hollywood.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about the time frame that we got here, where that movie was made versus now, and when we did it, it's about the same. Maybe
it was like,
longer. So
like
that was 25 years after all that had happened, maybe, or 30. Not even that, and
not
now,
even.
No, not even. Yeah.
And
It's
now
like
we're
17 years or something.
Yeah, and so we're almost 30 odd plus the big explosion, which I guess I'll say 88 was kind of the year zero, I think, really.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like, yeah, I mean, it was the vestiges were still there, and I loved that about it. I mean, Hollywood was a freak show.
Yeah, I was tasting so cool, the air, the sweat, the just Fredericks of Hollywood personality test, Bronson, Mayfair. It's like that you could still just taste the air there, you know what I mean?
It was, it was like left alone. No one wanted any part of it, like, I mean, only us fools who thought it was cool. I don't remember ever like police and being, shit. I mean, it was like anarchy. And as long as you could survive, you were okay. But no one really bothered you. You had your beater car and your shitty apartment and your fucked up band, and you were trying to get a record deal so you could make $1,000 a month, and that was living. And no one, it was desolate. It was desolate mostly. Most of those places, you could walk down Hollywood Boulevard, half the places were closed or should be closed. And
I think we're headed back towards that.
There weren't any hipster bars. There was none of that.
You're right, headed back. And Melrose, like you say, walking on Melrose was like the daytime club. You went down to Melrose and that was a club all day because it didn't seem like anybody worked.
It was like the third venue, like people, you had these apartments that you go to the Jet Boy house and party or whatever apartment. And occasionally someone would have a party up in the hills and everything. But the real kind of like networking shit was to just go to Melrose. I mean, I had a plum gig. I got really lucky. That was influential in my career, is that I got a gig at Flash Feet, which was owned by Alan Jones, who also had Let It Rock and managed LA Guns. And that was a big deal.
Wow. And Francois working at Let It Rock, like just drink. I walk in, he's drinking. Guy's drinking a beer in the middle of the day at his job. Like, this place is way different than Jersey.
Well, and Tierney at Retail Slut, when I first came to Hollywood, Tierney was working the counter at Retail Slut. So that was just the way it was. And I was just lucky to be there. And I think every guy who worked at Flash Feet got a record deal. I mean,
it's true.
I think every single one. And who was a musician. I mean, there were a couple people weren't. There were a couple girls who worked there, but it was a place that you eventually got, there were a couple younger guys. And actually, Rami worked there, who's now in the Foo Fighters. So there you go. Yeah. I worked with Rami for years there. And
Rick Parker
he talks about
Rick worked at Let It Rock. Michael Lockwood worked at Let It Rock. Soul Plant was a huge, I mean, I know members of James Dixon worked. So, I mean, it was just the way it was. And getting the right one was good. I mean, I had the Flash Feet for that moment was the kind of the party store. I mean, there was a lot of drinking and drugging, and, the till was raided often, usually by the owners. It wasn't necessarily us, though.
Yeah.
Rick would always talk about there was like a very strong bartering system where someone would come from another store and be
well, we didn't have...
here, just take these shoes. Give me those records.
Yeah. And, absolutely. It was an unspoken world that, Retail Slut had the good like swag t-shirts and if you wanted a hat or a bolo tie or whatever the fuck. We had Beetle boots and creepers, and Let It Rock was a little more high end. You could get a good, like, cool, we used to call them choir boy jackets, the Lennon choir boy style jacket. Yeah. And so you would go and you'd show up with like 2 pairs of creepers, and Mick Cripps would go, okay, you can have the cool, velvet shirt or whatever. And you go down to Retail Slut, like, I really want that in here, because you don't have any stage clothes unless you were getting them from fucking Melrose. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'd grab a pair of fucking JB, Beetle boots and take them down. It'd be like Morag, who worked at Retail Slut or something like that. Okay, grab a couple, and I grab like a doll shirt and a thing, and there was stage gear for the next 6 months, or a pair of stretch jeans, a pair of fizzies, because Let It Rock had fizzies. Which were fizzies were the fucking the busy bomb, and those were the kind of more expensive ones, the ones that eventually turned blue a little bit. You know what I mean? They would just wear like almost aqua, and so that was always a kind of those were a big get. A good pair of stretch jeans were like, and you had to have the right ones. There was, you had to have the cool ones. And so, um,
And that feeling of the stretch jeans, like that reminds me of Hollywood Boulevard, them just pulling on you as you sweated and walked in your uniform, in your creepers, in 1,000-degree heat, and just like that was like what you see in those pictures of Junkyard and GNR and Broken Homes
that's all
and
we lived in
Fizzies and
those.
Blackboard Jungle and like
That's what we lived in. We had,
Yeah.
I'm partial to a Beetle boot, a low cut boot, and a fucking pair of Fizzies and a black T-shirt and a big belt of some sort. And that was it. I mean, you
Yeah.
had but
I
it wasn't
remember
like you changed. You were like,
Yeah.
that's the only clothes you had.
I
didn't own a
remember
pair of
going to the
shorts.
bathroom and opening my my stretch jeans after being out all day and it smelling so bad, and I zipped them up, and then some girl brought me back to her apartment at the St. James that I always wanted to be with, but I'm like, I can't unzip my pants. This smells so fucking bad from just sweating in these things all day, man.
You were a gentleman. Mine could stand up in the corner, but at a certain point, like we were just like laundry was like what? We were just living like like we want
banshees,
to.
banshees.
Yeah, we were. It was that, and we didn't, to spend money on laundry as opposed to like taking those quarters and getting a bumper of beer.
I remember the whole apartment on Bronson getting crabs. It was like that. We got to go get Base of Trace, and now it's like it was like just normal. You know what I mean?
I remember. I'll leave that member of Broken Glass out of that story, but there was one who the whole band fucking got her like fucking hell, man. I mean, we weren't living the life of a saintly life at that point, but there are some limits, gentlemen.
Yes. Okay, now I think a good way to go out is like, Luke, what place do you go to, like the Viper that we're talking about being the central, and you walk through the doors, you go, I've been so many different people walking through this door. Do you have a place where the last place that freaked you out, like you go, wow, I've been a few dudes at that place, at that restaurant, at El Compadre, I don't know where.
Yeah. I mean, the Viper Room is one of those places, kind of, although all the stuff we've been talking about is getting my memory all revved up about things that predate the Viper Room.
Well, just pick one, man.
Yeah. That would be one right off the bat. I mean, that places like the Whiskey and stuff, they've been so changed sort of in an aura way, not necessarily like the actual structure is still there and it's pretty much still the same inside, but the aura of it is so different that I don't really feel like that. The Viper Room would probably be a place like that,
Well, also because it's still here. I mean, the places that really were important to me then don't exist, or they don't exist in the form they were, or even close to the form. Like I can't imagine like walking to the Probe where Scream was, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, playing Scream was such a big deal for us when we were able to do it. It was so influential that it was really career changing. And same with Club Lingerie. I remember that was walking into those little steps and then the steps down and all that, all that brick wall. If I could go back into one room.
Video Bob. There was video.
I mean, I had so many important things happen in those two rooms. The Viper Room's interesting because I played there as the Central. And the Viper has been the one place that I've done through, like I played there with Broken Glass, but I also played there with Sucker Punch. I also played there. I did the Broken Glass reunion show there, and now I bring Junkyard there. We do Junkyard there.
You'll have played last night by the time this is shown.
Yes, this will be. I'll be just shaking it off by the time this is shown, and so it's still. I mean, it's our home base. So I do, and I play with Steve Jones. I've done lots of weird shit there too, and seen probably the best shows I've seen since then. But maybe because it's one of the last things standing from that era. I can't imagine what it's like walking into. I did walk into what used to be the teaser, and that doesn't. You know what I mean?
That would freak me out.
It's weird.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see what that.
Well, it's all like kind of posh and like trying to be like a club, and it's like,
But the Viper, like you say, you've been so many.
This low ceiling. It's still the fucking teaser with a weird low ceiling and all this shit. I don't know.
The one that freaks me. What were you gonna say, Luke?
Just one place that is still standing that I definitely went to even before I moved to LA. Which,
Guitar Center.
I moved to LA when I was 18, but is Cantor's is still
Yes.
there. It
Standard,
still
yeah.
pretty much looks exactly the
Wow,
same.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah,
That's a
that
good
hasn't
one.
changed. Yeah,
That's really good, man.
yeah,
Wow,
that's-
you're right. And the boots, you're right.
And it's
Yeah.
another one of those places that, well, people play in the kibitz room, but it was a hub for
yeah.
post gigs when you knew there was no more alcohol being served and there was no more shows being played. It was a
Yeah.
place to still run into people if you were.
There you go. You see Brent Muscat eating, which was like, whoa, 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 whoa. That's
Yeah.
fucking, like, I feel
Yeah,
that
it was
way
great.
about El Compadre. Like, I still go
Yeah.
in there. It's still dark. You're still like, wow,
Yeah, it's
man.
great.
Like, we still meet up there. And the different selves I've been there, the fucked up self, the non-fucked up, the heartbroken self, the new girlfriend self. So many versions of Britt have walked through that fucking, and it's almost just the symbolization of that big
Totally.
wooden
The
door.
heavy
You gotta,
door.
And
yeah.
it had great air conditioning when we couldn't afford it, and the beers were cheap. So you go there for like lunch and get like a $2 burrito and a $2 bud, and that was it. And that was enough food to
Heaven.
last you the day. And the air conditioning was so powerful you wouldn't die. And
You're
that's
right. It's those little details. And it's
Yeah.
wow, man.
because we didn't have that,
Yeah.
and you could go to Guitars R Us and hang out there when Lockwood was working there a lot too. I mean, so you'd always, and that was a great hang, that little compadre towards
Oh,
the
that was the
Guitars
best.
R Us thing, because we didn't go across the street. I mean, if you had to, when you got a deal, you were able to go over there. But we were Guitars R Us, and that was, I met Dwight Yoakam at Guitars R Us. That was the place,
Yeah.
so
Man.
those kind of places. But yeah, that was a standard, like the death of mid-August and no air conditioning in your shitty holiday apartment. Like, let's just go to Compadre and buy like 2 beers and sit there for 3 hours.
I remember going there and dropping off my
I want to go there now.
I do
Dude,
too.
yeah. Do you remember dropping off a halftone at Charlie Chan Printing next door?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
You had to get a halftone to make a flyer if you wanted
Yeah.
to make, like, it was a big decision. Are we going to spend the money on the halftone and get the dots so it looks good?
So
Oh,
it's
right.
not all blotchy and
Yeah, you get a,
Look all pro.
yeah, you get the real flyer. You had to get the halftone. That was part.
Fucking flyering, man. Oh my God. It worked though. It did
Yeah.
It worked. It worked. It was
Yeah,
like
you had to do it, man. And if you didn't, Dale would scream at you so bad, like, I was blah blah blah, and there were no fucking flyers anywhere. And if you didn't
Yeah.
fucking flyer the cars at Cat House or White Trash or whatever,
flyering out of fear.
out of fear, because you'll never play this fucking place again. I mean,
I just realized her
he was
club
ruthless.
name was Scream, and you're talking about Dale screaming.
maybe that's where they got it. She,
Surviving Dale as a young man, and I love Dale. It's like
I
we've
love
all
her,
been to, we've all stormed the beach at Normandy and survived. I mean, that was that Dale is a rite of passage.
I always say I owe my career to Dale. I think she was really the thing that kind of put us into the world that got us our record deal. She took a shine to us and gave us a shot. We performed, which was good, and the band was pretty good. But, if she didn't, she had so much power, and her thumbs up of saying, I'll put you on that bill. That changed many careers. And,
Totally.
and every time I see her, I say, good, bad, or indifferent. I owe whatever Broken Glass became in beginnings of what was a professional music career. She put me in the place. We weren't shit. And then she gave us a show, and then we got exposed to a bunch of people, and then we were within 2 months headlining Lingerie on a Saturday night on our own. That didn't happen just because we changed being the band. We got in front of people, and she let that happen.
Yeah.
And she
Very
championed tons
integral.
of bands. Jane's Addiction would be nothing without her. She made them
Yeah.
the house band at the biggest club in Hollywood, or downtown it was then, but you know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? And they exploded out of that. Junkyard too, all those many, many bands. All
Yeah.
these Seattle bands who got signed owe a lot to her because she would bring them down.
Right.
Soundgarden played Scream, and Mother Love Bone played Scream long before they could get, before they were cool. They were
Yeah.
playing down there, and they got exposed to A&R guys because if you played Scream, there were A&R people there. You went instantly from having no label interest to like the big fat cat lawyers and labels coming after you instantly.
And the whole scene showing up in droves.
And all of a
regardless
sudden
who's playing.
you were cool. Like,
Yeah.
they played Scream, they're good. I'll go
Yeah.
see them at Lingerie next or whatever.
Yeah.
That's where the scene is tonight because they're a Scream band, and that's
Yeah.
all it took. And
Yeah.
she ran that place, and she was difficult, but that's why it was good. It was her
To survive. One time
survive,
I saw
yeah.
outside of 836 Highland, I saw Kim Fowley, Dale, and Len Fagan just talking and laughing and like, that's it right there.
There you go.
They really
Yeah.
were that was to me, that was
Yeah.
everything. That's
Yeah.
that's the three people that really, wow. And they seem like adults back then. They seem like, you know, they're like half as young as we are now, but they seem so much older and wiser, like they, you know, at that point. But
yeah, she was really important. I think that whole time has not been given justice in terms of people look back on everything and there's books about the hair and all that stuff, like that East Hollywood underground thing. And, you know, I know Desi tried to make a doc and I don't think he really got it, because you have to have, there's so many elements to play into it that no one's ever really nailed it. And maybe no one's tried, but because it was such a small thing. But I really believe the thing that people, when they think about Hollywood, it's out in the greater world, is not based on what was happening on the Strip. It's based on what Guns N' Roses came out of, which was this grittier East Side scream kind of underworld,
more arty,
and more arty farty.
Yeah.
You know, James came from it. People don't appreciate that James was a Hollywood band that, you know, became alternative, but they played, like I said, with Jet Boy. You know, so it's hard for me to. I hate giving. I feel like I give people like, well, there was this. It was. I'm not going to give you a. You know, I'm not Doris Kearns Goodwin of the fucking East Hollywood scene here. So, but sometimes I'm like, it is, some of that thing was lost in history, which is.
You're right. You're right. You're totally right.
When you're around the people who were there, and they know. That's why it's even a thing. Like, you were there. Very few people were actually probably at Scream. Very few. If you add them all up and put them in a room.
Well,
you know?
This conversation that we're having right now, I just want to point out, the last time Junkyard played at the Viper Room and I went, I've only ever known Todd Muscat sort of peripherally, but the three of us were sitting and talking and having basically this conversation. We were sort of mulling over some of the things, and it's really, really satisfying to talk to somebody that was there. I'm not even going to say like, oh, we're better, that anything like that. It's just, it's emotionally satisfying.
It is,
to talk
right?
to somebody that was there and sort of can bounce back at you, reverberate the things you're saying and you're remembering and stuff. I don't know what that is, but it just is satisfying.
It's very much that, you know, like I was saying about how it is hard to get guys, you know, we don't find guys who can be in Junkyard. It's like I said, it's a very small group when you could say these little things like, do you remember the blah, blah, blah? Of course. Yeah. And that was where I met blah, blah, blah. And this fucking happened and whatever. And all the bands, you saw everybody. So you really kind of knew, you know, you're pretty well informed. And, you know, some bands got bigger, some bands didn't happen that you thought should. That's really common. But that thing is something that I think even if we got across from Izzy, he would say, oh yeah, that was the thing. And I remember that. And so they were the ones that became the, you know, that is a very, when I see Tracy Guns, because we share management, I become friends with Tracy more now. I mean, I only barely knew him because they had kind of gone off and started to get big. But, you know, you talk about that and he gets that same thing because, you know, there aren't a lot of them left.
We all talk about, I went to see Brent. He told me when Muscat come down to the Key Club, Izzy and Slash are going to jump up with Adler's Appetite. And I was hanging with Brent, and Izzy probably ran up to Paul Black more enthused than he would have Mick Jagger. And it was like, wow. Yeah. Paul Black, such an icon. Icons like that we just haven't, guy changed music, wrote a template. Like you say, if you know Paul Black and the talent that he emits and still emits, you're just like, a
great example, like the Joneses, like that was a key band that no one knows about. People don't remember how big the Little Kings were. I mean, those were big.
I was going to bring up the Little Kings. That's so funny.
I mean, remember that shirt? They had a great shot.
Oh, they were an incredible live band. I remember seeing them live and going, because they had this kind of presentation that was like, you know, almost like how the Clash were kind of almost like regimented in the way they performed and everything. They had this whole thing. And it was great. And they looked kind of weird, but they were so East Hollywood. They were I'm sure that's when Junkyard got going. They go like, if we can get as big as Little Kings, you know what I mean? That was the kind of the goal. And they were neck and neck with popularity in Hollywood with Guns N' Roses when I was here. Like they were both that kind of like, they could sell out anywhere. They were headliners to Scream 2 nights at the fucking lingerie kind of band. And poof, you know, I mean, Gordon's all right for himself, but you know what I'm saying? It's an interesting how that the Joneses are kind of lost in the, you know, in what became the things that get big, and that's the nature of it, you know.
I remember Slash sitting outside the Troubadour when I first got here going, the only real band that's come out of LA besides us is the Joneses. I mean, he just said it that day. Like, you know, I mean,
well, those guys were like, that's what that was their template. I'm sure it was like the Joneses. Like that's where we're going to start. That Thunders, Bit of Hanoi, like that was where they kind of came from. And, you know, the Joneses had a big punk leanings to them too. They were that cross between the LA punk scene that was morphing into more rock, and Guns N' Roses took that and took it to the next level, and they had a different, you know, a next level frontman, which helped as well. So, you know, it's these things that I'm talking about that, you know, like we could go down these fucking rabbit holes on different bands and things like this for hours, and that's what you're saying. We give Todd, like he could go down there right with you, and there's only a few people who can do it.
I mean, even in like Flea's book, the love that he gave Mayfair Market at the end of Bronson, we've all like I could write a book on Mayfair Market and what that meant to me when I moved there. You know what I mean? Frank,
I was a big Rock and Roll Ralph's person too. You know, like
there's a whole chat.
Yeah, I lived there. You know, it was, and you run into like, oh, it's Steven Adler, Rock and Roll Ralph's, you know? It was a really small town in a lot of ways. Like the group of people that ended up being kind of in this, you know, and then it got bigger and people were coming out from the burbs and everything to come to shows, which was great and everything. But like the real core, you know, the group that you'd see at White Trash at Go-Go, say, that was, you know, those are the, you know, the Francois acolytes of the world, you know, like there's some fucking, that's a real thing. And most people have no idea what that means, what Motorcycle Boy means or all that stuff. And so it is always nice to get around, and because at the time you weren't thinking this is some great thing. You're just like, I want to get my gig and make something happen for myself.
And you also think it's always going to be like this.
Right. I didn't think
now it's an adult. I'm sure you guys both find this. There's more moments to be had. But you know when you're in a moment now, and you almost tell the people around, we're in a moment now, because sometimes we didn't recognize you're in a moment at that age when you're in it. You don't know, and now you kind of know when you're in a moment.
Yeah.
No, totally. I didn't. I do remember Guns N' Roses getting so big and thinking like, wow, this is trippy. Like to be even this close to something that big, where you just were even in the same area code, you know. Yeah. And how is this going to change things, and what does that mean, you know? But I wasn't a moment for me. I was still like, I need a record. You know, I was so fucking driven. I mean, I think that's one of the things people take maybe everyone was stoned and this fucking chicks. I'm like, not me. I mean, I was trying to get I was trying to get somewhere. Like this was a plan. Like I want to get a band. I'm going to write some fucking songs. I'm going to get a record deal, and I want to go out and tour. You know, I'm going to make this thing happen. So I was a careerist more than anything else, probably to a detriment. You know what I mean? Like I was careering, as Rotten calls it, careering all the fucking time. I think everyone quietly was. And I hope so. Otherwise, what was the point?
I think the three people here definitely severely were and still are in a way. And it just, I mean, you were so driven to get the golden ticket that you didn't appreciate. I don't think I appreciated enough the amount of people that would come out to see a rock band. That's what I took for granted.
I really did too. I mean, maybe because my friends were getting bigger, and so I never saw it as good. But I wish I had just been smart enough to go, you know, it's a great thing that your fucking local band sold out the Club Lingerie on a Saturday night. You should breathe this in for a minute. And I was thinking like, oh, what fucking labels here? And I hope the fucking lawyer gets them all in. And, you know, I was in this whole other kind of careering headspace, which probably made me uptight or whatever. But, you know, that was a big thing to accomplish for some kid who had only been off the boat for less than 2 years.
Sure.
And I look back and I'll go like, wow, far out, you know, but it was always like, what's the next thing? Like, but if we don't get this, then we're not going to get that. And this publishing deal, and you have the pressure of everyone trying to like pay their rents, and can I quit my day job? And, you know, you're the songwriter. It's on you to fucking write the song that's going to get us the deal, blah, 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 blah. So you get really kind of wrapped up in all your bullshit. But I do wish I had kind of enjoyed some of those moments more now. And because nothing was recorded, like I know that happened because I remember it happening, but there's no written record. There's no video record of most of these things. Like, people didn't have it on their phone. Everything now is, you know, I can search on a day 10 years back and probably find video of myself playing somewhere, doing whatever it is with Junkyard. And that's fantastic. But I never look at that. I'd give my left nut to see, have a shot of the crowd walking in the Club Lingerie in 20 minutes of us.
Oh, just to see the people standing around.
I would give anything to see that. And it just doesn't exist. you know, and maybe Lingerie had a library of all this stuff, but I think I heard that all got destroyed. So, you know, there's a lot of stuff that out there, and we never had any money to pay for those videos anyway. And we were always just like, oh, that's they look cheesy. It's weird getting your own video. Like, we were so dumb, you know.
There was a guy who used to, I forget what his name was, that used to, he was kind of TMZ before there was TMZ. He used to sit out in front of clubs. More later, like in the 90s, and he would film famous people or semi-famous people coming in and out of clubs, and he would try to interview them and stuff. Some of that's on the internet, on YouTube. Forget his name now, but anyway, the best thing of watching those videos is not the people they're interviewing, but the people that are hanging out behind them. It's like, oh my God, there's Shane, there's blah blah blah. You know, it's like it's
because those were the clubs. Like, you know, it wasn't when you wanted. No one went to, like, you know, when then the Hollywood club scene happened, and a whole different thing, that kind of Paris Hilton-y kind of cool clubs. But like back then, well, first of all, actors weren't shit and models weren't shit. It was
so rock was where it was at.
So they were all begging to get into, you know. I saw Robert Downey Jr. and all those type Brat Pack guys always at Scream or Cat House or whatever. That's where you wanted to go. That's where everything was happening. And so, and we never regarded anyone in any other media as having any relevance at all. Like,
totally,
rock and roll, you ain't shit. And we was like, oh, he's an actor. Like, you know what I mean? You know, I mean, we envied their money. Like, we saw how much money Johnny Depp started to make. We're like, fuck. But, you know, it was never like, you know, it was bands. Like, you know, Axl was the shit, not fucking whatever actor of the day or Kevin Costner. We barely even knew anything was going on in any other form of media, as I recall. Like, we were just so myopic. It was just
Axl was Jay-Z, and he was hanging out with us in but he was going to house parties. You go to a house party, and there's, you know, the biggest guy in the planet, basically.
I mean, we used to have house. I mean, we had a house party in our old shitty place in Hollywood, and David Lee Roth would show up. And this is Eat 'Em and Smile David Lee Roth. This is like peak David Lee Roth. That kind of stuff was pretty common, you know. I mean, these guys were around because that's where you wanted to be, you know. And but I would love. I mean, I wish there was, you know, but a lot of the appeal probably some of these places, but there wasn't footage back then. We got into more trouble because there was no footage. If everything had been recorded back then, oh my God. I mean,
it'd be a different world.
I don't even know, you know, I mean, I don't know how cognizant I was of my behavior. I wasn't. I had one goal, which was career. You know, so anyway.
Well, thank you guys. This has been awesome. I'm running this whole thing. This is great, man.
You sure about that?
I am. And say goodbye to everybody, and then we'll all say goodbye after this.
Goodbye, Metal Social Sunday.
All right, man.